Welcome to the May 6th Village Board Legislative Session. This meeting is now called to order. And I would, it's funny, we don't ever do the Pledge of Allegiance, so I guess we'll just go right into roll call. Martha, when we're at home, I should say.
Okay, Trustee Fritchie?
Present.
Trustee Lopez?
Present.
Trustee Casada?
Present.
Mayor Garrity?
Present. Alrighty, I'll open the floor to any trustees who have announcements to make this week.
I will start. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all. The first announcement that I'd like to make is about food availability. There was an article that came out in the Times recently talking about how nearly 1 in 5 young children in the United States are not getting enough to eat. And that is a huge issue. And I want to make sure that Ossining is a place where that does not happen. There is a partnership going on between Feeding Westchester, Galata House, many other organizations and bodies that are working together to make sure that food insecurity does not happen in our community. And so if you follow me, if you follow the village, Mayor Garrity, a lot of folks putting out information about where you can get food on a regular basis. We want to make sure that no one is food insecure in our community, but especially children. Second is about absentee voting. This is something that super important because everyone is going to be receiving an absentee ballot in the mail, an absentee ballot application, right? So the way that it works is you receive the ballot application in the mail. And it has a prepaid envelope. You fill it out. It has to be in blue or blank ink. There are a bunch of these little wacky details you have to be mindful of. Blue or black ink only. Then you have to select a reason for not being able to vote in person. Usually this would make it so that only if you have a designated reason can you not vote in person. And now temporary illness or physical disability, which is one of the choices, you can count as with respect to coronavirus in terms of not wanting to contract coronavirus going out to vote. So you can select temporary illness or physical disability. Then you have to fill in all 8 boxes on this thing and then sign it and date it and mail it. Mail it as soon as you can. Then you're going to receive in the mail a ballot. You look at your ballot and you choose who you're going to vote for there. Again, it has to be blue or black ink. Then you have to mail it back to the Board of Elections, okay? And so the deadlines are you have to get your absentee ballot application postmarked no later than June 16th. June 16th, much earlier than that, please. And second is you have to get your ballot postmarked no later than June 22nd. So if you decide to change your mind before mailing in your ballot, if you complete step 1 but don't want to complete step 2, you can go in person. You just don't mail back the ballot that you received in the mail. That is absentee voting. Number 3 is that I attended a webinar today that was organized by the New York Conference of Mayors, the NYCOM, that was about helping local businesses during the COVID pandemic, advice from the front lines. I'm sure there were other friends here on the call who are on it as well. It was great. I want to give you 3 quick things that I learned from it. One is surveying of businesses in terms of the impact of COVID to figure out who's open, how many employees do you have you received PPP or any other kind of funding, to get a sense of the businesses in our community and how we may be able to target help. Second is organizing industry-based conversations. For example, reopening restaurants or reopening retail post-pause, what that can look like. Those kinds of webinars can be super helpful for our businesses here in Ossining. And third is gift cards. So there are already businesses that have gift cards as an option, but there are municipalities that centralize that function so that you can go to one website and it has all the restaurants and businesses, and then you can select gift cards to buy from them. the municipality then gives that money to the businesses. And what that allows is for businesses that don't have the capacity to organize gift card functions online themselves, they can still take advantage of people's desire to want to be helpful. So those are some of the things that I learned from that webinar. Anything else that I learned, I'll share with you, and you can find a lot of that on NICOM's website. Last few things, domestic violence. So New York State launched a texting program. This information is in the web blast if you want to see it in detail, but it allows you to be able to text a number if you are the victim of domestic violence. And so you can text 844-997-2121. You can also visit opdv.ny.gov. But texting that number allows you to confidentially chat with a professional anytime, day or night, and is a great resource. So we're seeing the numbers rise, unfortunately. The chief can speak to that, but the response that we want to take is to provide resources to folks in our community so that they get the help that they need. My podcast is live. I encourage you to listen to it. It comes out every Sunday. Most recently, I had Jeff Gasparo, who's a candidate for town justice on there. This is an open invitation to anyone on this call, from elected official to village employee to citizen of Ossining, a member of our community. Whomever you are welcome to come on the show, and I'd love to talk to you. This is Omar Lopez Talks to the People, so it's all the people. I'd love to talk to you. The census is super, 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 super important, and we're still seeing Ossining not yet filled out enough for my satisfaction. We really need to get counted for all of the reasons that you have heard, but especially because of the funding that we deserve, and that all the people that we have in our community. We need to have roads and schools and businesses that reflect the number of people in our community. So please fill out the census. It takes 10 minutes to do. There's so much information out there about it, but still there needs to be more. So this is my pitch to fill out the census. And lastly, I know that there has been talk about murder hornets and how what that's all about. Recognize that is something that is on our collective radar. If you are worried, is Ossining thinking about murder hornets? Sure, yes, we are thinking about it, and so it's on the list. There's a long list. There's a lot going on, but murder hornets is on that list. And with that, those are all my announcements.
Mayor, may I just make one point about what Trustee Lopez said regarding regarding the absentee ballots? That is solely for the primary in June. That is not for the general election. So if you are not registered for a party, otherwise, or you're not eligible to vote in the primary election, you're not going to get the absentee ballot. So it's solely for the June election.
Thank you for making that clarification, Stuart. Okay, who else? Anybody else have announcements? Any other trustees with announcements or comments to share before I make a few remarks and we get started?
No, I'm good.
Okay, then I will just give folks an update on coronavirus testing. The good news is that there is more testing going on in more communities in Westchester County. Just this week, the county has changed the way that they provide us with data updates on how much testing has been going on through every municipality in Westchester County. So I just posted today, and you can check it out, the list of the map of all of the municipalities in Westchester County with two numbers for every municipality. One of them is the total number of tests that have come back positive since testing for coronavirus began. And that number is in parentheses. The other number, which is less, is the number of active cases currently. And so for the village of Ossining, we have 952 total cases that have tested positive. Many of those, the majority from our local Ossining Open Door. Most of those folks have recovered. So we right now have 146 active cases. It provides a much more interesting insight into what's happening to communities all across Westchester. We were one of the first communities to have testing. So we have consistently had one of the higher numbers of total test results. It's actually a good thing to have more testing, because that means more people are getting the information they need from medical professionals to limit the number of people that they then expose the virus to. So you want to have a lot of testing. And we're fortunate that we have had a lot of testing in Ossining. There are other communities that have not had as much testing, and they're seeing a higher ratio of folks who are active today. For example, our neighbors just up in Peekskill, they have not had a testing site. So their number of positive cases appears to be lower than ours, but actually right now they have more active cases. They have 170 active cases. I think we're going to start seeing these numbers fluctuate more and more as there's more testing going on, and as testing becomes available for more people. Because of the limited number of test kits up to this point, there have been a lot of limitations on who was allowed to be tested. You had to have symptoms. You had to have had exposure to someone who was known to have tested positive. Now it's much more widespread testing. And the next level of that is the antibody testing. And we have now started in Westchester County doing the antibody testing for our first responders, and the county is facilitating that. And also I'm aware that there are some healthcare providers who are also providing the antibody testing, which will let you know if you have been exposed. You may not have been tested while you were not feeling well, or you may have been asymptomatic and not known that you had it. So as those numbers come out, we'll have a clearer picture of just how much infection there's been in our community, the county, the region, and the state. And all of that is going to be major, major influence on when we get to see some phased reopening in the Mid-Hudson region, which we are part of. So the best thing that you can do is what you are doing. And we know that we have widespread compliance of people wearing their masks and practicing social distancing. And I hope that you are doing that. And I hope that you are also encouraging anyone else in your life where you have in your sphere of influence to be doing that as well, to be wearing their mask anytime you're not able to socially distance, staying home whenever you can, and washing your hands and sanitizing your hands whenever you're going to be physically in contact with things. And if we keep those practices up, that is how we will keep the rate of transmission down, which is especially important when we start the phased reopening. Because as soon as we have a phased reopening, there will inevitably be more interaction between people, which means we have to be that much more vigilant in our practices of social distancing and wearing masks and having clean hands. So that's my my PSA for the evening. And the one other thing I will mention is census. I believe Trustee Lopez referenced that. We are now above 53% of households have responded to the census. Last year, we only, 10 years ago rather, we only got to 64% of our population that responded. I'm confident we are going to surpass our response rate from last year. That's not good enough. We obviously have some greater challenges this time because we're all trapped in our homes, and enumerators cannot go out knocking on doors the same way they would have. And we also have, there's a sentiment that there's a level of fear among the immigrant community that that they are resistant to want to give their information to the federal government in a way that they may not have been 10 years ago. And that obviously impacts our response rates here in Ossining, where we have a large immigrant community. So those are some of the challenges we have to overcome. The good news is that this time we can respond by the internet. And responding via the internet means that it's much more convenient. You can do it on your phone, you can do it on a laptop, you can always do it by phone. And now, if you have not already responded by online or by phone, you will be getting a census or may have gotten a census in the mail. And we also in Ossining have the great benefit of tremendous partners. The village and the town are working with the school district and Neighbors Link and Open Door and so many community organizations to help people understand how incredibly important it is to respond to the census, partly so that we can be accurately represented in our federal, state, and county government, and partly because our population is tied directly to millions and millions and millions of dollars in funding that comes to our community. And so if there's anything you can do from the safety of your own home in just a few minutes, you can do it today if you haven't already, and that is respond to the census. And if you have, then have an outreach to anyone you know, either social media, family, friends, neighbors. in a socially distanced way to make sure that they have responded to the census. And if there's questions, then there are many, many resources that we have on the villageofossining.org website. Thank you very much, Janie Hoffman, for being so attentive to maintaining our village website with lots and lots of resources about the census that can help you better understand why it's so important and why your information is so safely protected with confidentiality. Okay, so that's my PSA on the census. We have another exciting discussion about budgets. And this is at least number 4 or 5 since the coronavirus has started. It's lovely to get to see our friends from the finance department. So Karen, I'll let you give us some context here and get us going.
I just wanted to give Trustee Levin, I know she might want to make an announcement. She just came on late. So let's,
Thank you.
I wanted to give her an opportunity. We had some exciting news this week.
Oh, yes, yes. Trustee Levin, please.
Don't know what the big exciting news is that I've told
come on.
you this. Thank you.
You do know what the big exciting news is.
What?
The Youth Bureau.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was thinking about 2 different things. Okay, yes. I'm going to do my rah, rah, rah. Not usual for me. So, and it's the whole board, it's the village manager, and it's a whole bunch of people involved, but we sat in, me, Karen, I was there, Bill Garrison, superintendent, community rec, sat in on the county legislation meeting. It was really great to see our legislators all there by Zoom. And with the support of Catherine Borgia, of course, they passed legislation, or they passed a vote to support the Youth Bureau in Ossining. I believe that it was said that it's the first one being built in more than 20 years. Very exciting. You have to be a population of greater than 20,000, which we meet. And I'm very excited. I'm also excited because sometimes by the time you get things done that take over 20 years in the making, and this board being so supportive, I think the sorry, lost my connection right there, is that I'm very excited because it got unanimous support. I'm excited for our youth. I'm excited for our community. And I think, and I said this publicly for the record, that given where we are with coronavirus, this is actually going to be a more important initiative than I think any of us thought about in the past few years, because we're going to need a youth bureau. And I'm really confident under village manager Tori and the staff that this is going to start taking off soon. The second update, and I'm sure Karen might have a few more words, but the second update is that I would have done had I been on time. I apologize. I was having problems with the internet actually in my house, is that the EAC met last night with the help of our new planner, all of 7 weeks that he's been with us, with Jaime, who's on here, and Stuart Kahan, that the EAC committee and council had an opportunity to share their opinions about what they would like to see in some new legislation. And it was really, really helpful. More to come on that in a May 20th meeting. But I just wanted to do a little update to my colleagues and to staff that the EAC is out there doing their stuff. Had some questions about budgets, etc., which we can discuss as we discuss budgets. So that was pretty fun last night as well, to talk with with the folks on EAC for the village. Thank you for the lob that I was supposed to hit a home run with, Karen.
Thank you, everybody. So as Mayor Garrity mentioned, we are following up a discussion that we had a few weeks ago on budget forecasting in the time of COVID. If you remember, we had presented a few different budget scenarios and how they affected the general fund. We were asked, the board requested that we make that more expansive across not only the general fund, but the water fund and the sewer fund, and then also look at, we've taken a look at some of our projects again across those 3 funds, and also projects that have been now will need to be closed, that are finished, some projects that have been put on hold. We're going to go through all of those, and later on, our treasurer, Tom Warren, will have a resolution to close completed budget items, but from years past, but from the previous year. But I would like to introduce our Deputy Treasurer, Dale Brennan, right now to bring you up to speed on where we are. We've done, the finance team and the department heads have done a really thorough job analyzing all of our capital projects with some detail about where we are on them and how we can manage those going forward depending on what scenario we may find ourselves in as the year progresses. So with that, I would like to introduce Deputy Treasurer Brennan.
Hi, good evening, Mayor, Village Board. Nice to see you all again. At our last board meeting on April 22nd, we discussed the board wanting a review of all of our active and open capital projects. We also needed to review projects that, while they were open, they weren't quite so active, and we're looking to be closed. So Tom had asked if he could review those first. So I would like to throw the ball to him to address the older capital projects that he has on for resolution to close before we go on to the current active projects. Thomas?
Thank you, Dale, and good evening, Mayor, and members of the Board of Trustees, and everybody else in attendance. Mine's actually the easier task. I just took all the capital projects that were definitely finished or that through Dale's work, we had determined from the department heads that they could be declared closed. And as part of the process to close capital projects, of which I've got a list of 36 that are in the resolution for tonight's board meeting. 21 of them actually have balances which need to go back to their respective source. If the money came from the general fund, the money goes back to the general fund. That's a little bit more than $133,000. Projects funded by the water fund, $68,802. There's $95,852 to go back to the debt service fund because these projects were financed with serial bonds or bond anticipation notes. That money will come back to the operating funds during the budget process to help pay for the bonds themselves. And we had one capital project that was financed with monies from the in lieu of Parkland monies. That's $1,756, and that goes back to the Parklands Trust Fund. In total, $299,842.59. And as was stated, there's a resolution later in the agenda to declare these projects closed and to transfer the unexpended monies.
Questions for Tom on the this aspect of our discussion regarding the projects that are recommended to be closed? We'll be voting on it later on, so we can certainly just make some general comments then, but since this is the step one in our budget discussions, I want to open the floor to any trustees with questions or comments. Okay. Seeing none. Tom, is there anything else that you didn't just identify for us that you were hoping we were going to ask about that you want to clarify?
No, I think that's part of Dale's discussion. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Then we'll revisit this when we get to the resolutions later on this evening. So are you passing it back to Dale for the next phase of this discussion?
I'm going to put myself on mute. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks. Hi, Dale.
All right, great. Thank you. Jamie, would you mind screen sharing the Village of Ossining, the capital project status review? Great. So basically, we did a review of all open capital projects, and while this was prompted in essence by the COVID budget, and reviewing more detailed for operating. It's an overall good practice, to review these, every quarter or 6 months, just so everybody gets an idea of where we at with different projects. So we're going to start with the oldest first, and this project at the top of the page is for parking meters. This was one of the original parking meter projects, not the parking meter project that the board approved for the 2020 capital year that we have not actually taken any action on yet. This project has a balance of $21,641. We are recommending, because right now we're just using this project for miscellaneous meter heads, repairs, that kind of stuff. But we could either close this project and send the balance to debt service to go towards the debt, or we can do a residual equity transfer and move these funds to the new parking meter project if the board so wishes to move forward with that. So any of the recommendations here in the last column, have been, back and forth with the departments. We can add to them, and we're definitely, absolutely looking for the board's input on these. So just wanted to get that out there. The second project on here is the Broadway Bridge, which is a beautiful project, as we all know. We're just doing some final project expenditures. Retainage will be returned around the end of the year, and then we should be able to close out that project at the end of this year. The third project is the new Indian Brook Water Treatment Plant. This project is ongoing and has a bigger discussion, as we all know, so we just left that as ongoing active project. The fourth project is for recreation for the pool pump. There's a small balance left in that project of $10,020 that Andy asked that we keep open because it's good for emergency purchases, for extra pumps or replacement parts. And that way we don't have to go back to our operating budget to find money to do those repairs. The fire department roof repair project. Most of this was completed for the headquarters in 2019. When I reached out to the chief, he said they have one more small roof repair at Monitor to be completed this year. So we will review at the end of the year and see where we're at in terms of if we can close it and have any residual money. The Route 9A water main replacement, we had expenditures for permits, surveys, management services. This project is going to ramp up in 2020 and is active. The Sing Sing Prison Museum project is still ongoing. I'm not sure of the status of grant funding, if any of that will be affected. So we're going to have to just monitor, I guess, in case that needs to be pushed off, in terms of not having the financial things in place. So on page 2, we have the John Paul Rodriguez Operations Center renovations. So when speaking with the departments and the manager, we're trying to see if there's alternate solutions that would be more cost effective while addressing the main concerns that brought the project to the forefront. So right now it's recommended place on hold for further evaluation and determine at that point if it's closed, then the monies go back to the related funds. The comp plan is moving ahead and it's strong. There you go. I watched the meeting last week, very informative and definitely what we need for framework and growth for the next decade. The Recreation Department AC chillers is a 50% grant match. And on that one, Andy might be able to fill in on what the details are on that one. But we
Can you
have
hear me? Because my internet's kind of screwy.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear? Okay. And that's the grant that we got from the county, the CDBG grant. So we have a 50-50 match to move the chiller to another location and fix the lower roof. So we should obviously keep it open. We just need to confirm that the county's still going to be funding these projects. And
Andy,
it's
this
for
is,
the community center.
yeah, but it's for like the kitchen, the senior nutrition program, correct?
I think that's different money. This was just for the chiller and fixing the roof and regrading.
Oh,
the
okay,
property.
okay. Thanks.
But yeah, that's a different town grant, I think.
All right, maybe because that went to the town. Okay, thank
Yep.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Andy. Yes,
Mhm.
that one is actually under the town for the nutrition for the kitchen renovation.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
Thanks, Dale.
sure. The next project is the 200 Main Street renovation, which we had done a board resolution earlier this year. That's for abatement, demolition, stabilization, and related work. This project is funded 75% by grant funds. So that's a great thing, and it's ongoing. The water demand management program was part of this, was the water saving toilets that we were able to give residents $200 towards a new water saving toilet. We were also able to do have a leak detection component with this project, which will ultimately, hopefully, find any leaks that we may have and save us money in the long run. So that one is still ongoing. There's the Route 9 Complete Streets Design, which is the Route 9 corridor. It's a traffic calming study, and that is an ongoing project. The community center repairs improvements, security. Right now it is currently on hold. Potential modifications to address immediate concerns and resume. Right now we're saying hold for the short term and revisit. The water department booster station shaft. This project, while we have it at $40,000, Andy believes that the work is actually going to come in at 10. So we would like to complete that work, and then after the work's completed, review and close it out. On page 3, we have sanitation trucks, which we're just waiting for, the final invoice for those 2019 projects to close that out. So we'll review at the end of the year, along with the fire apparatus engine pumper, which is a small unexpended balance, which will again be reviewed at the end of the year. We then have the 2019, sorry.
Jack likes that project.
He likes that project. Yes. Must have been the fire truck.
That makes sense.
It does. Then we have the 2019 street resurfacing and sidewalk project. We currently still have a balance of $174,932 that we have not expended to date. But what Paul will do is put any current paving projects against this project in the current year, and sometimes there's a split. If a paving project goes over, then we will charge it against the 2020 capital project, which is further down in this report. The next project is resurface basketball courts and LED lights. This one is hinging on the project below it, which was ultimately giving additional money to these projects in order to complete. And in that, when we were reviewing at the last meeting, I was saying that we could instead, where we had a general fund transfer of 122,000 of fund balance at the end of 2019, that we could take those funds from Parklands to finish these park projects if the board was so inclined. Below that is police department vehicles. In the capital plan, the board had approved 3 marked vehicles and 1 unmarked vehicle. After speaking with Chief Sylvester, because of the timing of ordering vehicles, and it takes 6 months after ordering to actually receive, he would like to order 2 of the marked vehicles.
I'm sorry, I'm having problems on my iPhone. 2 instead of 3, is that what you're saying?
2 instead of 3, and
Got it.
hold off on the unmarked.
Got it.
So,
Thank you.
so instead of 4, it would be 2 in total. And actually, the balance that's coming back to general fund from the closed capital projects would cover the $104,000 cost. So
Thank you.
sure. The next project was a DPW maintenance pickup truck, which the purchase order was submitted previous to COVID hitting. So that is ongoing. On page 4, we had 2 pickup trucks approved. 1 truck purchase order was submitted. The other truck, it had not been submitted yet. So that one is on hold for a 6-month review. The building department fleet vehicles, which are electric vehicles, that purchase order was submitted pre-COVID and is currently in process. The Parks Department dump truck purchase is on hold for 6 months. The water SUV vehicle is on hold for 6 months. The water department utility truck is on hold for 6 months. The police department completed the purchase of the Axon body cameras and storage. So that is basically complete. And the live scan fingerprinting system has a purchase order and is in process. The fire department generator is currently on hold for Andy and says review after 12 months.
I just wanted to say that whole bid is ready to go. It's designed and it's approved, so we can pull the trigger anytime. So, but waiting a year is recommended.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Andy. Next is Recreation Department pool repairs and resurfacing. Andy might want to chime in on this one. I know that they're actively researching an alternate.
Actually, Dale, Bill had done some looking into this earlier. So Bill, maybe you want to share what you shared with me earlier today?
Sure. So for the pool resurfacing, there's basically 3 options. One is doing a jet blasting and a total resurfacing of the pool. That's a very expensive option, and that was not what we had originally budgeted. The second option is they do an acid resurfacing of the pool and fix all the rebar stains, and that's what this money that's in this is budgeted accurately for. The third option that we did look at was to do some of the spot repairs, and that would be about $22,000 to do. Problem with that is that within any amount of time we could have new rusting stains appearing. So we could paint the pool, the spots for $22,000, but within have new spots forming. So those are the options that we explored at this point.
So if I'm going through this myself now. So my lesson from my own community center is spot cleaning is like throwing good money after bad. You either do it correctly or don't bother, and this is the time to do it. I'm not sure if Bill could maybe share with us either tonight or another time a whole strategy about pool, because under a lot of the health rules, changing every day. I don't know exactly when you all plan to open the pool and how many people will be allowed in the pool, and how children will be allowed versus seniors, etc. The time to do it. I'm just going to share with the rest of the experiences is no spot clean. Bill, that was my recommendation on here. If we go forward or not, that's a different issue, but we need to do it the correct way.
Moving forward now, based on what the governor's phases for recreation and pools probably makes sense, because that's not going to be in phase one, and it's an indoor pool, so it may even be longer. I don't know, Bill, we have talked a little bit about what that would look like. You know, because we'd have to get the bids out and everything.
Right. Yeah. My recommendation is to do the second option, the one that we budgeted for. I think if you're correct, Trustee Levin, if you could fix these spots, and with fixing those spots, it's going to be very noticeable. You'll see those spots. You can see what happened there. And like I said, within 6 months or a year, you could have other spots that are emerging. I've only been at the village for 2 years, and there's at least 2 new spots within the last 2 years that have surfaced.
Well, that's helpful context for us, Bill, that you've seen the emergence of spots in recent years. That's a pretty good indicator that those probably aren't the last 2 that we'd see in the next few years if we only did the spot repair. So thanks for letting us know that. It seems just that it's a little more imminent, and it seems that it would be a little bit, as Trustee Levin said, throwing good money after bad if we just did the spot repair. My question regarding this item is not whether we should spend the $165,000, but I don't know where we are with the Parkland Fund. There was at least one other item that had also already been mentioned that we talked about this last time. A goal for tonight, in my mind, is let's preserve as much of the general fund as possible. We're going to need it for this year's budget, and you guys are going to need it for next year's budget even more when we start feeling the real impacts of the economic devastation that we're facing as a result of this healthcare crisis. So there's much less flexibility in what we can do with Parkland funds. Right now, that's one of the ways that Dale was referring to that we can preserve our general fund, is to make use of the Parkland Fund for the actual recreational infrastructure projects where that can be used for. So Dale, I guess I'll ask you, where are we in our in the balance in our Parkland funds? And I'm sure that you were thinking about that as you were identifying which projects would continue as a general fund transfer and which projects we would draw on the Parkland Fund, because we always have the flexibility to use the general fund to pay for parks infrastructure. We don't have the flexibility to use the Parkland Fund to pay for anything other than parks infrastructure. So my ask would just be, anytime we can use the Parkland Fund, let's use the Parkland Fund for any or all of a project.
Right. And at the end of 2019, we have $127,709 in Parklands funds. And we're actually bringing back in $1,756 from closing the gym floor replacement. So that brings us up to about $129,000 of available funds that we could use. Yes.
Now, I did not compare this list to the list of the subset that we looked at a couple weeks ago. Are there any of the funding sources that are listed here drawing down on that 129,000?
Not as of yet.
Okay.
All the ones we had done, it was taking money from general fund at year end for 2019.
Okay. All right, and I think maybe when last time we spoke, we weren't exactly sure what was going to be the recommended next steps for the pool.
Right.
So this would color, if we decided to use the Parkland Fund for this project, if this project were really happening this year, it could cover the majority of that expense, and then the balance of it could come from the general fund. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
That's what that would be my my suggestion for that one then.
Can I ask a quick question in regards to this? So Bill, is this aesthetic look? Is that the reason why, or this is a healthy issue? And probably we asked that question before, but can you just refresh my memory in regards to these resurfaces of the pool itself? Do you want to do this because it's just going to look better, or is it because of the safety issue itself?
The real reason to do it is to keep the integrity of the pool. The rusting stain that you see means that water is getting into the rebar, and it's just going to continue to corrode and expand. So if you don't address it, it's going to continue to rust out the rebar. So that's the primary reason. The secondary reason is for the look of it, for sure.
Okay, so it's definitely a structural issue with the integrity of the pool itself. I don't know enough about pools, obviously. That's not my cup of tea. I go swim on them once in a blue moon, but I think I think definitely I remember when we did the floor a couple of years back, it came back with a different number, and we ended up paying more for it because we find something underneath the existing floor that we weren't expecting, obviously. So my concern is the $160,000, it may be more, and I don't think to be honest, I would rather wait a year, see what happens, our economy and everything else. That I wanted to do that. I don't think that was so with existing with what we have right now. That's just my take. I mean, we can definitely use the Parkland money that will only take away some of the burn that we have right now. But if we don't have that option, I would say put that on hold. That's just,
well, I think one of the considerations that I would push for if we're going to do it sooner rather than later is because, my 12-year-old said to me today, "Oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to go swimming this summer. No pools." That's a very possible reality, in which case, we're not missing out on having that resource. We're going to miss out probably on having that resource, at least for the foreseeable future. So my feeling would be, if we're going to do this and allocate the funds, preferably mostly from the Parkland Fund, that we do it as soon as possible, so that when we can open the pools, we can open the pools.
I tend to, if we use that Parkland money instead of using all the general fund money, then I will say yes. But if we have to, we have to balance something, sure.
So before we get too far into this, so Tom, can you just answer a question? Is Parkland money usable for capital improvements on a rec center though? Is that something we can do? Because it is Parkland, I think there may be I'm not sure that it extends to the rec center or not. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. And if we have to find out subsequent to this conversation, we will. But Tom, historically, have we ever done that?
Yes, we had made a argument to use the parkland monies on the gymnasium floor. I
Okay.
need to check and see what the rationale was.
Yeah, yeah.
We kind of deemed it to be equivalent to a park, and
Okay.
for recreational purposes.
So would we have to have would we may have to make a special case for this as well then? I just want to be clear that, you know, we could actually commit these funds.
I would say as long as the board agrees with the funding source, you know, unless Stuart knows something with regards to this, but.
All right. I mean, we can look into it subsequent to this. I think that what would be good though is like, this is one of several items where, you know, there's strong pros and cons to doing things, doing them right, or, you know, patching. So maybe if we go forward, with more context, and when we look at the things that we can really discuss, we'll have a better idea of what makes sense in you know, within the comprehensive budget.
I agree. I just had a quick question in regards to put this in the bigger picture. Sure, we do have to go, if we do decide to go out to bid or make this project happen, we have to have some sort of specs. Who's expecting now what is required to this? Is this money that is allocated? Is that include soft costs as well?
I believe so, but I'm going to refer back to Andy and Bill.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for for the job.
So the $160,000 includes an expert on pools that will do a spec that is required to go out to bid?
Yes. And the other thing is that that 165 is not all just for the pool. There's a portion of 45 to 50. It's for the splash pad inside the pool area.
Included in the 165,000?
Yes, yes.
What's
So
that?
you have numbers. So what is the soft cost? What is, because you made a statement early today where you have 3 different options. Sure, you said one was more expensive, you know, and this, you had the 2 other options. What is the soft cost amount for this project, and who's doing this? Who's the architect or who's the engineer who's spec'ing out this?
So Noberto Pools is the one that is providing the specs. They are currently finishing up the Dobbs Ferry pool. They built the Hastings pool. So they're a pretty well-known company, a pool builder. They're out of Long Island, but they do a lot of work within Westchester County.
What is the number? What's the soft cost number?
So for that option B would be around 108,000.
That's how much they're going to be charging to do the specs?
That is no. That is what they are. The specs they gave to us.
So it's still not clear to me, Bill, and I'm sorry. It's so when we go out to bid, sure, we do drawings or we have a specs from an engineer or an architect that go out, correct? So I don't understand. You're going to, you know, it's not clear to me who's spec'ing out what we need, and then that's how you're going out to bid, because we have to have 3 numbers, correct, for 3 different bidders.
Right. So the specs are general specifications for doing this type of work. The cost is based upon the square footage of the pool. So this budget number is it's a budget number estimation of the total cost of doing this.
So Bill, this is Maddie. Does that mean there's no design element involved? It's just sort of like a treatment on the surface of the pool and you pay by the square foot? Is that where you're going?
Yeah, essentially that's what it is. There's no structural, no engineering that needs to be done. We would have to do some work with the health department, because anytime you do any type of work on the pool, but this is a general maintenance that's done periodically on pools. And it's a procedure that is, you know, done with all pools. So it's like I said, I think that's a good way of putting it, Maddie. Thank you.
I have a quick question, Bill. These rust spots, if they seem to be eminent that there is a structural bleed through or a serious crack, that this is all a part of the cost that's in this job, right? To fix that, then I worry about the patch that you said. Could it bleed through? Is it going to be seen? There's a lot of things going on here that, a simple rust stain's a rust stain, but if the rust stain is close enough to the surface where it's, when they shot that pool, the rebar maybe might have been too close. There's reasons why the rust is coming through, and I just worry about that as far as is it going to be patched? Is it going to be seen? Because I know one of your options you were worried about just patching and seeing spots. So I agree with Mayor Victoria as far as moving forward with this. Probably now is a good time to get these bids out since we don't know, and who knows, 3 months, 4 months down the road, the pool's going to want to open up and we could have it done. I'm just using round numbers. I'm not saying that's how it's actually going to happen, but the rust stains, they concern me, especially on a big pool like that, so I'm just hoping that's just a part of if they run into that, that's not all of a sudden a change order that we got to patch this.
No, usually, rust stains are these, they're common in pools. The process really is, the patching is the same process they would use if they did the entire pool, except they're just cutting out that one certain area. And they cut it out, the cement and the plaster, they go down, they take care of the rebar, they'll remove the part of the rebar that's rusted, and then they reapply cement and then replaster the pool.
Right. So when they replaster that, they're just not going to do that spot. They're going to do like a 10-foot swatch of it to bleed it in, I would assume.
If we go with the patching option, yes.
Yeah. Or, if any, the acid wash, option 2 seems to be the way to go. But again, if they have to patch something, I'm hoping that when they do patch it, it's not a spot patch. In other words, it's just where the rust was. They're gonna feather out that texture on that thing so it makes it go away.
Oh yeah, with option B, the entire surface will be totally smooth. You won't see any places where they did the individual work on those individual spots.
Okay.
Can I say something?
Sure.
All right, so being that it's a project that's over $35,000, it has to be formally bid unless Bill has this contractor on a consortium like NJPA or something else that we're signed up with. My suggestion, because from what Manny's saying, is that Bill has a proposal with specifications, but they're not actual generic bid specs that need to go out and need to be publicly bid. You need to get someone that can come in with low soft costs and develop the bid spec based on what Bill wants and get a fast-paced bid and put it out to a public bid, because unless you do that, it's, Tom's against that. I've dealt with this in the past. Tom, do you have any comments on this?
I have to agree that if there's some type of a consortium price that you can use, that would save us the time and effort to put it out for competitive bidding.
Other than that, an architect that's familiar with pools needs to develop this bid spec with what Bill wants, set a bid date, put it through the clerk's office, publish it, and then if it's the lowest qualified bidder, that person gets it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is at least 3 of us are supportive of moving forward with the recommended $165,000 version with the acid washing. That will be the most effective way to address the problems that we see now and maintain the integrity of this very valuable asset to our community. And if possible, and it sounds very possible that we'll be able to pay for a good chunk of it out of the Parkland Fund. We'll just confirm that as really my goal is just to use the Parkland Fund for any and all that we can this year to preserve the general fund. But that also the timing of it is, it would be quickest, it sounds like, with what Andy was just suggesting, if we can use like an NJP or whatever the name of the group is, the consortium that we're already a member of, because then we could just immediately go forward with having that done while nobody gets to swim anyway, right? Okay.
Correct.
We're on page 4 of 6. Okay, so we still have a little bit more for Dale to show us. And I think there's probably plenty of things we want to go back to once we have the full context, as Karen was saying. So Dale, what do you want to talk about next?
Great. So the next project is our additional street resurfacing and sidewalks, of which we had transferred $450,000 from general fund, but $400,000 is being funded by CHIPS. If we just keep the $400,000 for CHIPS funding in 2020, plus the residual balance of $174,000 from the prior year's capital project, that should give us a nice balance of $574,000 to move forward to do paving in this year, and then we can reevaluate in the fall maybe to see where we are.
Can I chime in a little bit there?
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
Thanks, Dale. So what I had discussed with the manager is the paving of Broad Avenue, full length, and Revolutionary Road from Highland Avenue to Rockledge. There's multimodal money for Broad Avenue, and then there's the balance, the aforementioned 2019 balance that Dale referenced, and then the CHIPS contributions left over, and then for 2020 calendar year. I believe that I could get the majority of that work done with those funds, and what if we didn't, then we would just touch into the 2020 borrow. But that was standing. I told Karen we're doing prep work this month and next month and trying to pave early in the summer, Broad Avenue and Revolutionary Road. We have some significant drainage work we have to do on Rev Road, and we have some concrete and curb improvements we need to do on Broad. Plus, Broad also needs treatment similar to what we did on Walden Road for the subsurface concrete that exists there now. If we get that all done for the monies that we mentioned, and we revisit this, like Dale said, in 6 months, then we could talk about diving into the 2020 listed borrow to do additional roads in the village. But right now, we're just committing to 2 because of the significant work that has to be done in advance of just paving. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Paul. So on the following page 5, the board had actually approved debt resolutions for the 6-wheel dump truck, the 2 Mason dump trucks, and the bucket utility truck. DPW at this time is putting the 6-wheel dump truck and the 2 Mason dump trucks on hold for a 6-month revisit, but would like to move forward with purchasing the bucket utility truck because it is quite old and in need of repairs, too much to keep up with. So they are requesting to move forward with the bucket truck, but to put the other trucks on hold for a 6-month revisit. The next project is the finance department and the Edmunds software project. We are currently moving forward. We have a go live date for financials and payroll of July 1st, a go live date for water of September 1st, and a go live date for tax collection of November 1st. And we are currently sticking to that. We had a phone call with Edmunds last week to review how we were going to do training. It will be virtual, but I feel confident because people have been living in the virtual world basically for the last 2 months, that this will go smoothly. And and it'll work out just fine. Next project is the water tank mixing and aeration, which the board recently approved the debt resolution. So we are moving forward with that. Underneath that is 2020 capital projects that were approved during the budget process, but we have not established them to date. We have not done a debt resolution. We have not created a capital project, but they do, still exist as an approved board project, of which I touched on earlier, is the parking meter project, which we have a $350,000 project budget, which could be reduced if, for the borrow amount, if we transferred the balance of $21,641 from the 2004 parking meter project. The urban soccer complex, we had
Dale, I'm sorry, it's Rika. I was taking notes on this. Could you repeat the parking meters, please, again for me?
Sure.
I heard up to it can be reduced, and then I lost you. I'm sorry.
Okay, sure. We have a balance left in the 2004 parking meter project of $21,641, which we could transfer to this project if the board wanted to move forward, which would reduce the amount we needed to borrow for the $350,000, reduced by the $21,000.
And the 350 is an estimate, correct? Because nothing's been done yet. Is that right?
That is
Okay.
correct. Yep.
Thank you.
We have not done a resolution to create the project or do a funding resolution to borrow yet.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. The urban soccer complex, it was approved during the budget process, but no activity on that one. The shaft for pump station generator was approved during the budget process. Andy would like to evaluate that in 12 months. Then the final project on this listing is the McCarthy Road water main replacement. This project is budgeted at $700,000. We have not done a resolution for debt or to establish it as of yet. And this is a joint project with the town of Ossining.
Dale, can I just, while you're mentioning McCarthy Road, I was also going to ask about the water tank project. That was just a couple lines earlier. Both of those, they reference that they're debt. They're water fund debt, not general fund. Is that right?
That would be correct. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did we talk about the police HVAC job at all? Is that on here?
No.
Okay, so that's open still, and that's awarded, but there is going to be a change order that I'm going to come to the board in the next month as soon as I get a final price for the VAV boxes. So I just want to make sure that the board's aware of that. That's not my dog.
Adjusted up or down?
It's going to be up. It's up. There's 40 VAV boxes that were not part of the original scope, that when they started hooking them up to the existing control strategy, that the gears inside were totally ripped apart from 20 years ago. But I just kind of want to let everybody know it's probably, each one is at least $1,000, so it's like 40,000 on that 289. But I want to make sure everybody's aware of it when we're looking at what we're going to cut out and what we're going to keep.
Okay.
Andy, quick question. When this was approved, I don't remember if I was on the board or not, but I remember you had added an additional 10,000, I believe.
Yes,
into that project.
Yeah, you're right. That was for heat if we were going to do it in the winter, but we're not in that. So that 10,000 would go towards that 40. It's a good point.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to need. Yep. So it'll probably be like 30, but the overall change order will be 40.
Right. I remember that being brought up, that you added that extra 10. So okay, I just wanted to make sure.
It's one of the few projects that we did not put contingency that we should have put in, but we didn't.
No, I understand.
And normally we do put 10% contingency, so we would have been okay, but it's fine.
It is what it is.
Yep.
So some of this, when you talk about you know, if something's changed, where the money will go. And you started off talking about parking meters. I think it's really funny that we have a project that was open in 2004 and it's still open. That gave me a chuckle. That was fun to start off that way. And obviously we're now at a totally new phase of parking meters, and we're really excited to have parking meters that are of this generation that will be much more effective and functional for our community. And I know that the management office has been working with the police department and all of the relevant departments to try and figure out how to move that forward. And then will also be discussed in part of the larger conversation of everything to do with parking and transit. And we've got lots of discussions that we thought we were going to have this year when we thought this was going to be a very different year. But I will say, you know, there's a recommendation of that $21,641 that's left. We could either put that toward the 300 and whatever thousand it is for the new parking effort, or we could put it into debt service. If we're gonna, I'm really gung-ho on borrowing while we have these really low interest rates, and saving anything that we can in our general fund for not even the 2021, but the 2022 budget year. So even though we're only talking about $21,641, my vote would be put that back in our fund, and we'll use it as appropriate. We're going to borrow $300,000 anyway for the new initiative. If I'm remembering the numbers correctly, I could just look here, $350,000. Just do a clean, whatever we need for the parking meters, just borrow it. Pay whatever the nice low interest rate is that we have at the moment, and hold on to every penny that we can, because we aren't quite sure what the next couple of years are going to look like. And then the Broadway Bridge, I just want to say I'm really excited. That's like the most beautiful, lovely project, and thank you everybody who made it possible, especially Paul. You did a really terrific job championing that. And does this $173,142 is that all coming back to us, or is there still a little bit more detail work that's going to be drawing on that before it's released and we close that project?
Now, the only thing, correct me if I'm wrong, Dale, the only thing that's outstanding there, payment-wise, is the retention, for which we pull 5% out of every invoice from the start of the project till the last invoice. We don't anticipate any other soft costs or bricks and mortar costs from that project. And the retention is already encumbered in the existing POs that were handed in and held in a retention line by Dale. So that's already included in that 170 plus or minus calculation. So that's goes back to debt service.
So are we ready to close that one out or not yet? I guess that's more of a Tom question, who was doing all of our closing outs.
Well, it could be a little bit of a field question, typically with projects like that, because that was a significant project with which you never really know what can happen in that 1 year of warranty and retention holding.
Okay. I understand what you're saying now. I guess I wasn't really understanding what you were saying before. Okay, now thank you.
That's why she made the reference to closing it at the end of the year, and it actually coincides with the 1 year from substantial completion, which is when we can release the retention. So it all lines up.
Okay, good. We'll have a better sense when we pass that budget in December of how that's looking, and fingers crossed that everything is as we expected it to be 1 year in. Okay, I'm sure my colleagues have additional questions and comments. That's a lot of information. Thank you so much, Dale and Tom, for putting that together for us, and for everyone who, from every department that helped us made all of your thoughtful recommendations.
Thank you.
I can go. I want to echo the gratitude. My first question is about the objective of this conversation. As I understand it, we are heading into a space where we know that our revenues are going to go down, but we don't know by how much. And so what we're doing is looking at our capital expenses to determine which of them that are in process we may want to pause, which we may want to stop, and which of the ones that we have coming up we may want to not start yet before we dedicate monies to them. Is that accurate, or is there anything that I'm missing?
Trustee Lopez, I believe that's accurate. I also believe that as the year goes on, particularly when we get to August and we have a better idea what our tax revenue situation looks like, we'll be able to make some decisions throughout the year so that we may be evaluating this on an ongoing basis based on, you know, as we get closer to the end of the year, what our projections are for 2020 budget, as well as what the outlook looks like for 2021. So I think it's really like a point to touch base, basically pause things that certainly aren't essential. And then as we go forward, it's a good time for the board to review and start really sort of prioritizing based on where we may be going, so that when we do have to make those decisions, we're confident that we're applying the money where we think it's going to best be used for greatest impact.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's helpful, because that tells me then that we're going to be having this conversation on an ongoing basis as the picture becomes clear. I think that's one of the things that makes it hardest for me to be able to put this into context, because I don't know what we're aiming for exactly. We don't know what the deficit will be, or I don't know if deficit is exactly the right word, but the reduction in amount of revenue will be. And that to me would dictate a lot about whether, yes, these are the exact right things, or no, we actually have to get a little closer to the bone given the numbers that we're dealing with. But it'll be an ongoing conversation. My second question is, for the items that are listed as having been purchased or the process beginning pre-COVID, what is the date that you're using as COVID beginning?
So that just means basically before we knew there was a pandemic. So we had budgeted, we were early on in the year, there were some purchase orders that went out early this year before we really had any indication that this was going to hit us, and certainly hit us as hard as it did. So I would say before March, basically.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think that one of the questions that could come up for folks is, were there people that felt like, oh man, like we may have, and this maybe even be like too many steps ahead, but oh man, we may have a reduction in revenues. Let's get these purchase orders in so that if they start to cut projects, we've already started this, and so it gets grandfathered in. But that may be too Machiavellian. That's I may be overstepping here.
You know, look, I mean, the reality is there are things we have to do no matter what the budget situation is, for sustainability, for, you know, just responsibly operating in the village. And a lot of these things are pay now or pay later. So that's always something that you're balancing too. When we did the budget, originally, we did it with an eye to that efficiency. So during the budget process, when we went through and we scoped out the 2020 budget, there was a lot of attention. So a lot of that more Machiavellian stuff, probably, I don't know that there really was anything Machiavellian, but a lot of those decisions on prioritizing were done before we adopted the 2020 budget. I think that the things that were placed first on the, you know, the purchase orders were really the things we knew we needed. You know, that's how we were budgeting. So, you know, that's how we were planning. It's not unusual even in good years to put things that maybe are you know, more speculative or you know, to evaluate certain things as the year goes on, because you never know what you never know what's going to happen in any given year. Even before this, we didn't know what was going to happen with the sales tax revenue. We didn't know, you know, any number of things, other things could have happened too.
Yeah, that makes sense. And this may be, I'm not sure if this question fits into this conversation, but it feels right, so I'm going to go with it. So one of the conversations that I have heard come up is, well, this year we didn't have a lot of snow, and so certainly we had money budgeted for snow removal and things like that didn't go toward that. How does that fit into our larger budgetary? Is that like a small part of our budget? Is that a notable part of our budget? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to toss that one to Dale and Paul, because it's not necessarily a huge part of our budget, but it is monies that we will recognize in savings And I, you know,
And
so
it does-
yeah.
It does snow in October, November, December. Just, you
Right.
never know.
So usually that's really, you don't really fully realize it till December 31st, what that number is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it. My last question is that I think that it's too early, given everything that I know about where we are, it's too early to get to this point, but I want to at least put it out there as one of the things that I'm thinking about is, are there any budget items that are untouchable? So I take, for example, the water treatment facility, right? A huge project, very, very expensive, but required for meeting the health needs of our community. But is that the kind of thing that we start to look at revenues and we go, we need to find somewhere to cut? Do we cut like 10% of everything, or here's like this big project that if we were to pause a part of it or something? Are there projects like that that are just untouchable, or is basically everything on the table?
The really, for the most part, like when you were talking, I mean, look, depending on the situation you're in, anything can ultimately be touchable. What we're talking about when we're talking about capital projects, that's where you have the most fungibility because they're not, you know, contracted items. We have been having some internal discussions about the water treatment plant because we do have a little bit of time now since we have to delay the bidding process. So, you know, Andy, Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about our initial thoughts on how we could manage this process depending on the various scenarios that could emerge towards the end of the year?
Yeah, I might as well speak. So right now we're still dealing with the health department on changes that they required us for the UV system and the MIB removal. Just get the water quality and all that, just to let the board know, we were as high as 100 MIB parts per billion. We're putting out less than 5 out of the plant now. So the system is working awesome. So, you know, everything's in the right direction. But the new plant design will incorporate that so we don't have to feed so much of that powder activated carbon. There's discussions that have to happen between the town, tax-wise and everything else, that the board is aware of it. The health department is incorporating these changes along with Hazen and Sawyer to finalize the final plan. But Paul brought up a good point. New York City, to me today, New York City funded our leak detection program where you guys approved that paying that New York leak detection a couple months ago ahead of time so that they could start working. The goal is to find 200,000 or 300,000 gallons of unaccounted for water. We're at 18%. If we can drop that water down to 12%, 13% in unaccounted for water in leaks, because they're going to be spending 54 days in a couple of weeks going through our whole entire system, that'll buy us another 6 months to a year, you know. So we're trying to buy time here, just like we found that 400,000 gallon per day leak about 5 years ago, which made all the difference in the world of us not going to Newcastle or to Briarcliff for interconnection water. So, but we still have to build this plant, you know, whether it's a year from now or a year and a half, we have to build it. Now, we looked into increasing our distribution storage because the plant is sized for 4 million gallons a day, and there's days we go above that. So we thought, can we put distribution storage in to make it through those tough days? Still 15 years out, or excuse me, 10 years out, we're going to require over 6 million gallons a day. 10 years out, looking at the comprehensive plan and the demand study. So we're going to have to build it no matter what. We don't have to build it within 6 months. We don't have to build it within a year, but it might be a year and a half because it takes another 3 years to build it once everything's approved. So we have a little time, but we wanted to see if we can add more distribution storage. But then the problem is if we put that distribution storage, not only would it be $5 million for the tank for a 3 million gallon tank, it would have to be 350 feet high over by Kelly Court, over by Waterview in the town. It would be so high, it would be ridiculous. So, and the cost would be astronomical. So we've looked into everything. Eventually, we need to build this plant, and that's something that can't be, we can postpone a little bit, but it has to be done.
And if I may, Andy, in short summary of everything he just said, the leak detection work, again, funded by New York City, we definitely want to take advantage of that. We definitely want to do it during this COVID lockdown, because that work requires very limited traffic and a lot of quiet to do that work to that level of detail. And it's really the perfect time to do it. So that's why we spoke with the manager. I know we're trying to restrict work, but this is one project that we can maintain appropriate separation and safety and still accomplish with a New York City funds paying for it. And we're hoping that, like Andy said, that work is not really obviously a plant replacement. Based on our comp plan, and I'm sure based on the new comp plan and the revisions, we're still going to show the projected build out, for which I think our last estimate, Andy, of 6.7, which we can't produce now without buying purchase water from someone else, is 10 years out.
Correct.
Right.
Correct.
So if we need 6.7 million gallons projected in 10 years, we need to start that plant on the schedule that we've set forth already. We're really, we're going to do the leak detection no matter what anyway, because wasted water is just that. However, like Andy said, it might buy us a few months, but it's definitely not buying us an option not to do the plant.
We were, just so numbers are numbers, but we were at, 6-7 years ago, we were as high as 30% in leakage. And we range between 17 and 18%. And it's just so aggressive. And I think we're going to find more. But that's all we can do.
Thank you both for giving us that context and that deeper understanding. I think it's reassuring for people to know that you're constantly evaluating. Is this what the village needs to be doing? Because this is the largest infrastructure project that our community has ever undertaken. So in a good year, we wouldn't take it lightly. And so I'm really glad that, particularly in this moment where we're looking to save every $10,000 and $20,000 project that we can, that with this major project that you guys are looking again and really confirming the importance of doing it, and doing it at the scale that we are, and doing it at the time that we are. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I remember when we first did the big leak detection push a couple of years ago, and I'll be excited to see more savings of water. That's just a satisfying thing to accomplish. So keep us posted on that one.
Repeating, just if I may, real quick, Mayor, what you said earlier, it's also we're being opportunistic with the rates for the borrow, and it's also going to be hopefully projected to be a very competitive bidding environment over this next year.
Excellent points. All pointing to this is the right thing to do. As hard as it is to swallow that big number, that you were doing it as efficiently as possible, kind of taking advantage of the moment, and that you've reaffirmed again the importance of doing it and doing it at this scale and at this time. Thanks for that.
I wanted to say one last thing. Before we agreed to have Hazen design the new filtration plant, Hazen and Sawyer, we had them look at every aspect. And that number of distribution storage that we just talked about with tanks, how we could possibly buy time. What I've said for the last year with the disinfectant byproducts and us finding the leaks, it caused the numbers to go in the wrong direction. So by us adding more distribution storage, it's going to cause more of a problem of the water aging. So you want the water to move out faster, and that's why we're putting those mixers and those elaborate systems in the tanks. So not only would you have to build a tank, you'd have to build those elaborate systems. So I don't want to put a Band-Aid on it, but that's the next step.
Thanks. Trustee Lopez, you still had some more comments and questions?
Yeah, I just have one more. This is one that is a tough one for me because I've done editing work in my life, and one of the things that editors will say is don't be afraid to kill your babies. Like, don't be so tied to what you've written that you're unwilling to actually look at it critically. And one of my babies when it comes to auditing is the comprehensive plan. I love the comprehensive plan. And I'm also aware that it's a $300,000 expense that we haven't spent that much money on at this point. And because I don't know what the denominator is, I don't know what the goal is, I don't know if that's a number that if we were to have a $300,000 savings, it would make the difference between X and Y. I don't know. But the question that I have for my fellow trustees is this. There is an argument for delaying the comprehensive plan for a time when we're able to meet in person and do a lot of the community engagement work in person. There's also an argument for keeping it going exactly in the schedule that we have. And you heard a lot of that argument last week. What I would love to hear from my fellow trustees is, are you still committed to doing the comprehensive plan in the given schedule that we have in this year? Or is that something that you would revisit?
I'm so glad you asked that question, Trustee Lopez. You and I spoke about that a little bit after last week's presentation. I also had a chance to speak with Trustee Quesada about it a little bit. And you two are the ones who have been in the room really thinking about how to move this forward. I guess it's not surprising. We had a pretty good turnout last week for the virtual Village Hall meeting. And nobody who was there, I was surprised that this question didn't come up in that context. Although I guess logically, the people who aren't there are the ones that we're not reaching. and so I think it's a pretty reasonable question to say we've prioritized community engagement as such a core part of this whole process. And in some ways, virtual outreach makes it more convenient for some people to attend. But we know that there are parts of our community that probably are not able to participate in the way that they might have. So I'm glad you raised the question. I'm interested. I see that Karen has taken her mic off mute, so she probably wants to chime in now, and then I would love to hear what my other fellow board members have to say.
I didn't realize it was off mute, so I think I just swiped my pad. We have executed a contract, so there are terms associated with that contract, so that's an executed contract. So there may be ways that we can rework that or delay it, or something really for the board to discuss. And maybe Stuart can weigh in if there's any concerns regarding the fact that we do have an executed contract.
I'd like to just make two comments on it, because I think there are three of you on this board that have been more involved, not more passionate or anything like that, but we've decided that we're going to have always two board members on it. I think the comprehensive plan is a key factor of importance. If we go into a major recession or depression where everything will be on the board, I would reconsider it. Unless something has changed, and maybe what I should be listening to more carefully is maybe something has changed and I'm just not aware of it. I don't know if I should sort of listen to what is being said and also what isn't being said. But it seems like out of the things we're working on, I'd rather give up a couple of other things. Some of the capital expenses that are important but might be able to wait. This to me seems like a core function of government and a core importance to trustees, whether it's us or future boards, because it drives a lot of infrastructure discussion. It drives a lot of all the things we just talked about, actually. It involves staffing, it involves boards, and involves the community so very much directly. Because let's be honest, I don't know if I have the right number, but I think out of the total budget, somewhere around 75% is fixed in some ways. We could still change it, but it's staff, it's benefits, it's all that. Those can be changed too, but they still remains a big chunk of it. So for me, if you're asking me priority from 1 to, this is pretty high up there for me, unless something has changed, and I'd be happy to listen to it. I don't know about the number 300 versus 200 versus 100. That's also something to discuss. Contracts, yeah, they're legal instruments, but even under the pandemic, so many contracts, simply by calling the other party, no threats, no, reading of the Riot Act, simply saying, I either can't pay it or we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's like saying we're in the middle of a war. Most people on the other side, especially those that want to do business with us in the future or with other municipalities, I think will probably be okay with saying we'll wait on it. So I'm actually not worried about that part. So we're okay with it, whether we've executed the contract. Now for me, and it's not a legal issue, I've just seen it now go into effect. It's really important for me. Again, for those three of you that have been much more intimately involved, if you tell me something has changed, whether it's tonight or some other time, for me, it's one of the most important things that involves so much of this community and drives so much of what we do for the next 10 years that I wouldn't want to give that up unless something really dramatic is occurring. There's so many other things I would give up before that, is the way I would look at it in context of a big picture.
What I was hearing from Trustee Lopez, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, was not that we shouldn't do it because that's not a good use of funds. It was maybe we should hold off until we can engage the public in a more thorough way so that people can actually be in a room together and they can think about something other than their health and their financial well-being, which is pretty all-consuming for so much of our population. Okay, I did not hear that. I didn't understand that that was the comment being made. That's a different scenario altogether. Okay, I'm going to turn my mute, which I love because I can, and I'm going to think about that. I'm not going to just speak because I need to hear myself talk. I'm putting myself on mute and giving myself a minute to think. Okay, Trustee Quesada or Trustee Fritchie, do you want to weigh in on this topic while we're talking about the comp plan?
Thank you. So I'm just going to go a little bit of general stuff. I want to thank Dell and Tom, obviously, and everybody else on their end. All the work that they did for the capital projects is very helpful to actually see all this stuff. Obviously, right now it's 9:09, and I don't want to go too much into detail since that we're going to be looking at these capital projects throughout the couple more meetings and kind of deciding on a one-on-one basis and how do we go about it. Obviously, talking about babies, as it was mentioned before, definitely want to talk to staff a little bit more in regards to the elevator component of one of the buildings that we have that have been, anyway. Talking about the comp plan, so thank you, Omar. I had a chance to talk to our mayor as well briefly in regards to your concerns. I understand, the reasons why you have these concerns. We kind of touched that in the last previous meeting that we had with the community itself, and we kind of all decided that we're going to do a lot of outreach in different ways, and part of I think what we could do is and what part of this whole, I don't want to say exercise because it's not an exercise, but part of the process on my thinking is we can do a lot of the foundation work that a lot of the putting things together, so when we are ready to come and meet with groups of people of our community, hopefully will be before the end of the year, we'll be ready to have all that stuff. There's a lot of things that I think we can tweak from now on, doing it online. I don't, me personally, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think if we put a pause on this, it will help us more than waiting another year. Just keep in mind that, something that I mentioned to the mayor was, this has been put on hold since 2018. So we are in 2020. So in reality is we are talking about 2022 at least, when we are going to be seeing a comp plan that, if anything, it all depends on what may happen. So are we, if we want to delay this project, just keep in mind that this project is going to be delayed at least for another 2 years. Then nothing's going to happen. That we're still going to be having the same issues that half of our board and probably other people have been complaining for the past 7 years at least, with different issues, and even ourselves, struggling with things that sometimes happen, that should not be happening. That we have things that we want to modify, and we want to change, and we want to make them better. So it's going to be another 2 years that nothing's going to happen. So I just want to make sure that if that's the route that the rest of the board wants to have, and again, is going to be 9:15. I think we need to have a deeper conversation in regards to what we want to do with this. So I will want to hold this to a next work session and have a deeper discussion on this, and probably Rika, have some more time to think about, in a different perspective, involved the same way. But I want to put this in hold for our work session discussion instead of having this discussion right now. So.
Very good point, Manny, and I tend to agree with you 100%.
I agree that we should talk about it another day, is what you're saying.
Next
Yes.
week, I think
Okay.
he means.
Okay.
You mean next
All right.
week, right?
We're very booked on our next round of our next 3 meetings. So one of the things I would like to say, because there's many different ways to look at this. The next round that we're doing is stakeholder engagement. That stakeholder committees, the response we've gotten for that is significant. So we've had a lot of people calling us who want to be involved in the plan, involved in stakeholder committees. That's work that is outreach, but it's done in a more concentrated way. As you go through the planning process, you start reaching out and out once you've sort of formed things based on information. So the immediate getting everybody in a room for stakeholder meetings is actually Zoom. Everybody who probably would be involved in that, Zoom is going to work fine for. When we're really looking to get out in the way that we want with people who are not necessarily spending a lot of time on computers and we want to get out, we may want to adjust that time frame a little bit, because we're going to be much later in the year for that. That's not going to come now anyway. So we have our meetings with a lot of priorities are pretty scheduled, so we can certainly relook at this whenever you want. I'm just saying, like right now, I don't know if we're at a point where if the idea is community engagement, not whether or not we should go ahead. The community engagement, our next level of community engagement, is not as difficult to do virtually.
So my only add to this, now that I've been on mute and can think and listen, is Omar, if there is a way for you to do a straw man as to what it is that you would define as community engagement that you may envision that isn't currently happening or is not on the plan, and therefore can outline, like, this is what I'd like it to look for. These are the people that aren't being included that I think should, and this is sort of the way it might be approached. That would at least inform us as to, are we talking about 3 months or 6 months, or should that happen before the stakeholders? If you have a sense of that, now you may not have a sense of it, and I understand that, but if you do, that would also be helpful to answer your original question. Now that I understand it, might be, so you're thinking of a 3-month delay, a 1 month, or this might take a parallel path. It's hard, for me to put into context because I don't know exactly what you're envisioning that isn't happening or should happen differently, etc. So I think that would be helpful if you're able to do that.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. So
one other thing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'll just answer Trustee Levin's question, and then please, Karen, jump in.
Sorry.
So it's, for me, here are the populations that immediately come to mind. You have senior citizens and other older folks. You have the immigrant community. You have people that have lost their jobs or have other kind of financial hardships. And you have people who have had health issues either directly or are caring for someone who has had health issues, or they've lost someone that has been close to them or something like that. These are all people that, whether it's now or 3 months from now or 6 months from now, likely it's going to be difficult in the current structure of things to engage them, right? And so what we're saying, which I don't think is a wrong thing necessarily, but I just want to be explicit about what we're saying, is there are populations of folks that we won't be able to engage as thoroughly as we would if we were living in a time when we could be in a room together and we could have posters up at the train station or at the diner or whatever, when we can go to churches, when we can do stuff like that to engage with these different populations. And there is a possibility that we come up with a comprehensive plan, which, number one, is going to be an update on the last one, because the last one was quite strong. And so we're not talking about starting from scratch. We're building on some of the work that has already been done. But that could potentially be missing some of those voices. Now, I could already come up with a counter argument to that in saying like, well, like this is like a process that's going to take a long time, and this is just the plan. Then we're talking about implementing, that takes years. You know, like there will be opportunities for people to get their voices heard before any of the things even that are elucidated in the plan actually get done, right? And by that time, we will hopefully be able to be in person together. But what I wanted to do, my main purpose of this was bringing up the conversation now, before we have actually spent the money, so that if 6 months from now, 12 months from now, we're sitting in a room and we're looking at capital expenses, and then comprehensive plan is at nearly zero. We've spent nearly all the money. We go, man, like we really wish we had another 300K. And we have people saying, I'm really upset because I didn't get a chance to participate. At what point did you all talk about this being the right time? We could point them to this meeting and say, well, here's what Trustee Levin thought, here's what Trustee Quesada thought, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Which is why it is so important to me to get your thoughts out on video, no matter what time it is. If this is what we're here for, this is what we're here for. And I want to say that, like, I'm 95% in for doing it at this time. 100%, 95% in, right? But there is that 5% that I'm like, I get it. I get the arguments that people have for wanting to pause, whether because of the populations I named or because of the budget situation that we may be in that we don't know, where we may need to make cuts. So those are my thoughts, please. Village Manager DeTore.
I just want to raise one other point, because we talk about this almost every time we have community engagement. And one of the challenges is some of the populations that you talked about, although recognizing this is a different situation that affects more people, that some of the populations that you talked about are difficult to reach in public for various reasons. And I can't think of any study that we've done where since I've been in Ossining, where we've done outreach where somebody hasn't said after the fact, not enough people showed up at that meeting. Because typically when you're talking about a population of 25,000, a big meeting for something like this could be 50, 60 people, maybe 100 people, maybe. And we always have, and typically it's the same people. So that outreach is an issue we have regardless across those demographics. I think that there are ways that we could be creative, because churches are having services and we can zoom into those services. Like, there are people meeting, there are groups convening that represent hard to reach populations. St. Anne's is got a huge following online and that would represent a largely immigrant population, senior population. So I actually think in some ways, like the forcing us to be creative might, just playing devil's advocate here, might get us to engage more. The other thing that I want to say is that some of the things that we're looking at, and again, I'm not making an argument. Again, I think that we have ways to work within the framework. One of the things that I think that is important, that was raised and was based on input by the committee in talking with BFJ, is why do this? Because we asked that question of the committee, like, why do this now? And we do have other people on the committee who are pretty vested in this as well. It was really because so many people in our community are affected disproportionately because of issues that have not been dealt with and addressed in a long time. Even issues like internet access and you know, overcrowding, we know that that's a zone that can be addressed by a zoning changes that we're working on. So I think that it's always going to be, I think if it's really thinks that it's a serious issue that we're not going to get that engagement, then that's something that we need to put the brakes and talk to BFJ about too, because we are, regardless of, you know, yes, contracts could be dealt with, but it will be something that we have to deal with. And I believe early when we spoke to the BFJ, this came up, and we didn't, you know, again, things are changing so rapidly. It's hard to say on any given day who knows what's going to happen. But I think that for the time being, based on the responses that we're getting from people, and the engagement of the subcommittee groups, I don't think we're harmed by going forward at this juncture. Again, maybe looking at ways, depending on what the summer looks like in the fall, of stretching out the process. We had a pretty aggressive timeline on this of like 12 months. So if we stretch it out to 14 or 18, I don't think that's unusual. Our timeline on this was very aggressive anyway.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we did have a very thoughtful discussion a week ago with a decent amount of attendance. This campaign really kicked off last June with 50 or 60 people at the library. And what was amazing was that it wasn't all people that come to all of these meetings. And what that tells me is that our community, we know we're a very engaged community, but somehow people were actually interested enough to spend an evening at the library talking about a comprehensive plan, which is such an abstract, dry concept. We did a good enough job in getting the information out there that I was really pleased to see more people involved. And Karen, I really liked some of the suggestions you had for additional virtual avenues to reach out to people. But also what was reassuring to me that I think we can all feel pretty comfortable, at least for the next steps, of doing the stakeholder meetings, which are very targeted. It's people who have either work in or dedicate a lot of volunteer time in to particular aspects of the plan, whether it's housing or economic development or environmental concerns. And so as we're putting together those subcommittees with those stakeholder groups, that's something that as long as the people we're reaching out to, and it sounds like they are having a positive response, as long as that population is able to move on to the next step, that I'm comfortable, you know, keeping this conversation in our consciousness, so that when, you know, maybe not at next week's work session, but I'll look to Trustees Lopez and Quesada to keep us informed on how those meetings are going and the subcommittees are going, and when should we revisit this conversation. Maybe you'll come back to us and say, we're so pleased with the ability to engage with the diversity of the community and the level of response we're getting to whatever this next phase is, that we'll say, wow, this really was the right decision to move forward. Or maybe you'll say, we're a little concerned, we think we've come to a point where we should slow down and wait another 3 months and revisit it, and we can do that. And I think, you know, contract or not, if, you know, so much of this contract was about public engagement, if we come to the conclusion that that's not able to be fulfilled, then that's probably reason enough. And as Trustee Levin said, you know, they want to work with us and other municipalities in the future. So I'm sure the BFJ would be amenable to if we needed to make some adjustments. So is everybody sort of comfortable with that as our conclusion for at least the next steps going forward with what we've been hearing from Karen and others? Rika, your mute is off. What did you want to say?
I didn't want to. It shouldn't be.
Oh.
It should be on.
Okay. Is there anything else that people wanted to say on this before we? All right, Trustee Lopez, was that your last item on the capital projects?
That's it.
All right. Well, it was a big one. Good. Anybody else? Any other Village Board of Trustees members who want to comment generally or specifically about where we are with capital projects and spending?
I'm good.
I would. Generally, I'm sorry, Bob. Did you want to go?
He said he's good. He said he's
No,
good.
I'm
Sorry.
good. Go right ahead. The floor
I
is yours.
general, not specific. General is thank you, Dale and Tom, and everybody on staff. I thought that you guys came back with prioritizing things, what should be looked at 6 months, 12 months, super, super helpful. That is one scary virtual picture there, Bob. And and I really appreciate it. I'm going to say that I think I'm in agreement with like most of it, actually. I really appreciate that you followed up with the police department, and there's some recommended revisits to some of the items on that are relatively big ticket. I took some notes down. I don't need to go through this stuff. I think we covered most of the stuff I wanted. So I really appreciate the work, and I do want to continue this on a very continuous basis. And we will learn every week things that are different. We're going to see if camps are open and what that does to revenue and expenses, all sorts of stuff. And that's going to change literally every week. So I appreciate the work being done. Thank you.
Trustee Quesada, did you have any other items you wanted to discuss on the capital projects plans?
No, I think, I think all that stuff, besides a couple items that I want to follow up in next couple of weeks, I'm pleased to see a lot of the stuff is in here. And obviously at some point of time, I want to talk about overtime and things of that nature, and what does that mean, from our police department and DPW staff, what we are looking into. Are we having overtime? Are we doing any overtime? I know there's and part of the resolutions that we have tonight is 2019, and there's an overtime line in there and a couple of stuff. But again, that's 2019. We're talking about 2020 now. So in the future, I would like to understand a little bit more, and what does that mean? Are we utilizing all of that going forward? And so I'll follow up with that with staff on an email or something, along the lines from that.
So I just have one other thing I'll just highlight, because we went through it pretty quickly. I don't think it's controversial, but it's it looks like we still are keeping in the budget the $50,000 for building department fleet vehicles. Now those are electric vehicles, is that correct? And I think these will be the village's, and unless I'm forgetting, the village's first all-electric vehicles, and they'll be plug-in vehicles. And I know you can just plug it into a regular wall, but you do need to be able to park someplace where that's a possibility. And we do have the charging station that has 2 spots. The town has vehicles too. So I'm pleased we're moving forward with that. We do these environmental initiatives for multiple reasons, partly because we want to reduce our carbon footprint. We want to be good examples for our community of what it means to be a good steward, and to take seriously the impacts of climate change. And sometimes it seems like a disconnect when people are talking about just their financial stability as a family and the health of their loved ones. And it's hard to talk about something that seems a little more abstract or further out in the world. But I'm really pleased to see that that's still in there. And there is actually a pretty strong correlation between so much of what we're experiencing in our healthcare community and with our financials. That I also really appreciate that when we make decisions to do things that are sustainability initiatives, they usually are also financially beneficial initiatives. The biggest example is the LED streetlights, where we save $100,000 a year on our electricity costs, and it more than paid for itself right out of the gate. And so this is a much smaller venture, but I'm glad to see we're moving in that direction. And I'm sure Trustee Levin took note of that as well. I know that electric vehicles are something that she's been a real champion of for the village. So I look forward to seeing more and more of them next year and beyond. So I just wanted to give a nice shout out for that tiny little sustainability initiative and greening our fleet effort. It's so important, and it's something that we can definitely be doing more of.
I can actually give an update on that. I actually spoke with the dealership last week to just check in with them, and they said we have you down. You've ordered them. They're ready to come. So as soon as the executive order gives them a little bit of breathing room to get them to us, they'll be here in a quick second.
That's great news. Okay, then Dale and Tom, is there anything else that you wanted to clarify or confirm with us before we move forward? I know you're probably going to hang out until we go through these resolutions, because heck, we have a legislative session ahead of us, and we haven't even looked at our first resolution yet. Is there anything?
I don't have anything, but I just want to say thank you. And, if you're looking for any further information or details on any of this, just chuck an email or give a phone call.
Great.
Thanks.
All right. So then that was the first administrative report. Karen, do you have any other topics you'd like to bring to our attention?
I think that in the interest of everybody getting a good night's sleep, I think that we've covered mostly everything, and let's go on with our legislative session.
Stuart. I'm sorry. I'm jumping in as our clerk for a second because I have the agenda in front of me. Stuart, do you have a report for us this week?
Very, very brief, Mayor, and thank you, everyone. This is more in the sense of a public service announcement. We're getting a lot of folks who call us, they call the police, they call the clerk, as to whether their businesses can open and when they can open. There is a very lengthy set of guidelines set down by Empire State Development as to what is considered an essential business and what is not considered essential. If it's something that can easily be determined, we can provide an answer. Otherwise, the suggestion, not even the suggestion, the clear recommendation that I give is that the individual will need to contact Empire State Development and find out from them if their business is one that qualifies as an essential business and can be opened. Simply put, neither the building department, police, nor corporation counsel, and Kevin, I apologize if I'm speaking for you, but we are not going to give the go-ahead to someone to open up a business unless it is something that is explicitly clear that it is an essential business, construction of a school, for example, or something like that. There are 2 occasions, in fact, where people did go to ESD and received, in one occasion, they received approval from ESD to do their work. In the other, today we got a notification that Agriculture and Markets gave approval for work to be done as essential. But simply put, if you come to the clerk, you come to me, you come to the police, you will get the same answer. If you go to the Empire State Development website, they have the form you can fill out. You send an email, they tend to respond within 24 hours. If you get an email that says you can open and you provide it to us, we will provide it to the appropriate folks and you can do what you have to do. But we are not in a position to give you that permission. It has to come through the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Sylvester.
You've all said everything I want to say, and it's getting late at night. This week, we're continuing with training. In spite of all the restrictions that have been put on, we have to get certain in-service training done this year. So right now, our staff is at the range doing firearms training. For anybody that may have missed it, last week, we helped the Austin Union Free School District conduct a teacher's parade to salute the students and let students know that they're appreciated. So that's a lot of fun. We're continuing to do what we can to keep morale up around the village. We are overwhelmed with requests for birthday parties for children and adults, strangely. We do those when we can. We can't always. We turn down quite a few of them, but from time to time, we're getting out with the ambulance corps and doing some stuff like that. And you'd mentioned before about first responders and antibody testing. Our department starts tomorrow, and over the course of the next week or so, anybody on our staff that volunteers to participate that will have that opportunity.
Great, thanks. Next is organizational announcements. I see just one person, and it may not be a member of the public who's an attendee. So is there anybody who's a participant that had any other organizational announcements? Not a lot happening, but if there's any other announcements you want to make, now would be the time before we move on to village board resolutions. Okay, I would also open up if anybody wants to comment on the village board resolutions, any member of the public before we move forward. Not a lot of members of the public who might, and that person is not. Okay, so Madam Clerk.
1 second. Okay. Approval of minutes, April 15th, 2020. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining hereby approves the minutes of the April 15th, 2020 regular meeting as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Let's see. Approval of voucher detail, May 6, 2020. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining hereby approves the voucher detail report dated May 6, 2020 in the amount of $500,634.75. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? Fire Department tax exemptions 2021. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Austining hereby approves the following fireman's tax exemption for the 2021 year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Is there continuing business of the board?
Appears no.
No, okay. New business of the board, Finance Department discussion and resolutions for December 31st, 2019 fiscal year and budget modifications.
Is that me?
Yes, Tom.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I had sent out a rather lengthy memo summarizing our finances for 2019 and asking for some year-end budget modifications. This is done in conjunction with our audit, which was the last 2 weeks. The auditors give us a chance to do some year-end budget modifications. Mostly it's for like financial statement presentation purposes. But I just wanted to give a very, very brief summary as to how we did for 2019. We had kind of touched on this when we were working on the 2020 budget and we're talking about where things were looking like we were heading. We had actually ended the year with about $1.2 million of surplus revenues. Part of the year-end budget modifications are to appropriate some of that excess sales tax, as well as some of the departmental income for presentation purposes. So the financial statements are actually going to show over $991,000 of surplus revenues, other than the sales tax distribution, which was up anyway for the year before the sales tax increase took effect mid-year. Also, departmental income was up over $120,000 over the budgeted amount. Interest earnings last year, Dale did a fabulous job of investing village monies. We'd actually earned $361,000 more than what was estimated in the budget. Regrettably, the interest rates are down in 2020, so that won't materialize again. Licenses and permit revenues were $143,000 more than estimated in the budget, and also mortgage tax revenues almost $38,000. On the downside, real property tax revenues were less than what was estimated in the budget, and this is because of the 60-day rule for revenue recognition. It almost is equivalent to putting the sales tax revenue, it's almost on a cash basis, but that's the accounting standards. And there was also tax surcharge claims. The current year portion needs to be charged against the property tax revenues in 2019. So that was the only negative revenue aspect of significance. On the expense side of the budget, actual expenditures were approximately $2.2 million less than what was budgeted. A lot of it was personal services because of vacant and unfilled positions. There was also a lot of equipment and contractual expenses that we were able to stay within the budget. And of course, employee benefits, in part because of the reduced personal services, but also because of the reduction in like health insurance and such, being self-insured. There's a lengthy budget modification that's submitted for board approval for the general fund, water, sewer, and for Section 8. I also wanted to mention, though, in the water fund, back to the general fund real quickly. Even though there was a large amount of surplus revenues and unexpended appropriations, which has a tendency to increase fund balance, we did have, because we've been appropriating fund balance in the budget to keep taxes down, that offsets the increases. There was also the budget modifications during the year for 2019 street paving. That was $250,000 that was appropriated. And also at the end of the year, we had appropriated a large sum of fund balance, about $760,000 for vehicles and equipment, and also the $450,000 for the street paving project. So overall, when you look at the revenue variances and the planned use of fund balance, the net increase, the fund balance is, I want to say it's yes, about $621,000 net increase of fund balance. The unassigned general fund balance is about $14.2 million at the end of the year. In the water fund, revenues exceeded budget estimates by $402,000, and there was also overall unexpended appropriations of about $339,000. There was also use of fund balance on capital projects, most notably the Route 9A water main capital projects. So the fund balance in the water fund increased by about $525,000 during the year, and the sewer fund budget, or sewer fund, also increased by about $38,000. So that's what I have for the year-end financial review in advance of the request for the resolution to modify the budget for year-end financial statement purposes. Any questions?
Everything on this list is distinct from the list of projects that we discussed with Dale immediately after, correct? Then the one item from the list that Dale presented to us, and I think it was the first item, was the parking, which would have $21,641 in unexpended funds, that I was suggesting should go back into, I guess, debt service fund. That can be done at another date, right? I don't need to upset these beautifully composed, very complex resolutions, but that was, I think, the one thing that that I was asking for, but it doesn't need to happen right this minute.
The resolution tonight to close the capital projects and move the $299,000, that's actually going to be a 2020 accounting system transaction. We've closed the books. They've been audited. We're doing some year-end or some final loose ends for the auditors, aside from the year-end budget modification, which was anticipated with closing books, but everything else that we discussed tonight about capital projects is going to be a 2020 accounting transaction.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have any questions in following up to what Tom just presented to us? So we all got the email earlier this week with the great detail. Okay.
Awesome.
Is Martha on deck now?
Martha, you have two resolutions to read?
Yes.
Yeah. She was just unmuting herself, I think. Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I was unmuting myself. I'm sorry.
No problem.
Okay, so finance budget modifications, FYE 2019 budget transfers, general fund items. Resolve the 2019 general fund budget is modified to transfer monies between various appropriation accounts and to appropriate excess revenues received for unanticipated expenditures during the year as summarized by the village treasurer. And be it further resolved, the 2019's general fund budget is modified to reclassify the revenue classification for New York State's per capital state aid, now described as AIM-related payment. And be it further resolved, village departmental heads are authorized to balance their departmental budgets within object/items categories, i.e. within 100 personal service accounts or within 400 to 500 contractual accounts, or between object/item categories, i.e. between 100 personal service accounts, 200 equipment accounts, and or 400 to 500 contractual accounts, subject to approval of the village treasurer or village manager as follows. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Finance budget modifications, FYE 2019 budget modifications for water and sewer funds. Resolved, the 2019 water fund and sewer fund budgets are modified to transfer excess of available appropriations as follows. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay. Finance budget modifications, FYE 2019 budget modifications for Section 8 Housing Program Fund. Resolved, the 2019 Section 8 Housing Program Fund budget is modified to appropriate excess HUD fund revenues received aggregating $202,485 and to adjust other appropriation accounts as follows. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Finance Department resolution to close complete capital projects in 2020. Whereas it is good practice to periodically review the status of capital projects and to close completed projects and disperse residual equity balances appropriate. And whereas the Finance Department has reviewed the status of capital projects as of the end of 2019 fiscal year and to date in 2020, have consulted with department heads and recommend on certain capital projects be declared closed by the Board of Trustees. And whereas the Finance Department represents the project number 2149 water mains relining and replacement 2014 be closed with a residual equity transfer from project number 2186 Gordon Avenue water main replacement 2017, which is funded by water fund monies as an authorized use of similar source funding now. Therefore be it resolved, the following capital projects are hereby declared closed. The residual equity balances transfer is appropriate based on original project funding source, and the respective project budgets is modified to reflect the residual equity transfers as follows. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments on the board? Madam Clerk?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Visitor recognition. Is there any member of the public who would like to address the board?
I'm just making sure that oh, wait, there is another person here. Let me see who that person is. Oh, is there any member of the public who would like to address the board?
They can just raise hands.
Oh, I just want to give another moment in case the technology is taking a second for someone, our newest arrival to, no, we're good? Okay. Nope, no public, no messages from the visitors today. So do we have a motion? Are we moving on to a motion to adjourn to executive session for matters related to, I mean, it's all legal stuff, but are there executive session categories?
Real property.
For matters related to real property.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second.
And I thought legal also, no?
We don't need to go into executive session for that. We can always talk to a lawyer.
All right.
All right. So
All right.
we'll see.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. We'll
Take
see
care.
you all.
Did you need to say something, Karen?
No, no. I'm done.
Okay, well then with that, I will say I look forward to seeing everyone in this very similar forum next week for our work session. This meeting is adjourned to executive session, and I'll see all my colleagues in our executive session Zoom, which is a different link. So that'll take a couple of minutes, and I'll see you soon.